Thousands raised their arms. Only one dared not to, and this is what happened to him.
Welcome to Eternal Moments. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Start.
On the sacred grounds of the Forbidden City, where once only the emperor could set foot, the troops of the 8 nations raised their cups in celebration of their triumph over the Boxers. It was 1900, and a humiliated China watched its imperial symbols being desecrated. Amid ruins and debris, foreign powers posed victorious, believing they had tamed the Eastern giant. The echo of those celebrations still resonates like an open wound in Chinese history. An elderly eunuch leaves the Forbidden City in 1948, captured by the lens of the legendary Henri Cartier-Bresson. His silhouette, hunched and solitary, symbolizes the end of an era, the last vestiges of the ancient Chinese empire disappearing beneath modernity. For centuries, these men served the emperors, but now they were walking into oblivion. A single photograph was enough to immortalize the decline of an entire civilization. Empress Wanrong, the last ruler of the Chinese throne, pedaled through the Forbidden City in the 1920s, oblivious to the fate that awaited her. Her bicycle, a symbol of freedom, contrasted with the walls that had enclosed centuries of power and subjugation. Behind her smile lay a life marked by tragedy, drugs, and the fall of the empire. That elegant young woman on 2 wheels didn't know she would soon be a prisoner of history. Amid laughter, feathers, and makeup, the dancers at the Forbidden City Club in San Francisco, 1950, prepared for another night of lights and applause. They were pioneers, Asian American women who defied prejudices and conquered stages where they had previously been unwelcome. Behind the scenes, the mix of nerves and glamour created an unrepeatable magic. The name of the place couldn't be more ironic, a forbidden city where they were, at last, free. In the heart of San Francisco's Chinatown, the Forbidden City nightclub shone between 1943 and 1945 as an oasis of exotism and rebellion. There, Asian American artists broke racial and cultural barriers with music, humor, and sensuality. Soldiers and celebrities flocked, fascinated by its energy and elegance. In a time of war and prejudice, that club was a small empire of freedom and art under neon lights. An image from 1869 transports us to an ancient Beijing. Dusty streets, merchants with carts, and in the background the majestic Temple of Heaven watching over the Forbidden City. At that time, China was still a closed empire, unaware of the changes that were to come. Every brick, every shadow told the story of a world that was about to crumble. It was the calm before the roar of the 20th century. In 1901, U.S. Army soldiers stood at the Meridian Gate of the Forbidden City, a symbol of foreign occupation following the Boxer Rebellion. Those ancient walls, witnesses to centuries of imperial power, now bore witness to foreign boots and unfamiliar uniforms. The photograph captures the clash between ancient tradition and Western intervention. Every look and every gesture reflects a humiliated China and a rapidly changing world. In 1935 in New York City, members of the Society for the Suppression of Vice, along with Martin H. Meany, Deputy Commissioner of Police, supervised the burning of banned books. Those flames devoured ideas that some considered dangerous, but that today would be considered historical and cultural treasures. The scene depicts the struggle between moral control and freedom of expression in the 20th century, a disturbing reminder of how fear can burn faster than ink. In 1956, African American children stood behind a fence at a playground in Alabama from which they were legally excluded. Their gazes reflected curiosity, sadness, and the injustice of racial segregation in the United States. Each face tells the story of a country divided by laws that separated even childhood. A small image, but gigantic in historical and human significance. In 1937, Japanese troops entered the Forbidden City during the Second Sino-Japanese War, marking another dark chapter in Chinese history. The ancient walls that guarded centuries of culture and imperial power bore witness to occupation and plunder. Every step the soldiers took symbolized the breach of an empire that seemed invulnerable. A photograph that captures the clash between tradition and the brutality of modern warfare. In 1957, before the imposing Forbidden City, young Chinese ice skated, captured by the eye of photographer Mark Ribwood. The scene blends tradition and modernity. The ancient imperial walls observe laughter and free-floating jumps. Through their fun, these skaters show us that life goes on even under the shadow of centuries of history. A fleeting moment that immortalizes the joy between the ancient and the contemporary.
Between 1922 and 1924, Empress Wanrong posed in the Forbidden City, surrounded by her palace and centuries of imperial tradition. Her face reflects elegance and serenity, but also the loneliness and pressure of being the last queen of a declining empire. Every detail of her attire told stories of power, luxury, and a world that was about to disappear. An image that captures the grandeur and fragility of a historical legacy. In the 1920s, the Emperor and Empress of China posed after being expelled from the Forbidden City, leaving behind centuries of absolute power. Their faces reflect a mixture of dignity and melancholy, aware that their world had collapsed. The empty palaces and silent gardens were now only memories of an empire that no longer existed. A photograph that captures the end of an era and the weight of history on their shoulders. In 1923, a fire devastated part of the Forbidden City in Beijing, leaving ashes and ruins where centuries of history had stood intact. The blackened walls and rubble tell a story of fragility, even for the most powerful empires. Each charred stone seemed to whisper secrets of a glorious past that was almost lost in the flames. An image that reminds us that even the most solid symbols can be vulnerable. In Spain, in 1968, factory workers silently defied the law prohibiting strikes. During their lunch break, they stood facing the wall in protest. A discreet but powerful way of showing discontent under a restrictive regime. Each erect back and steady gaze represented courage and resistance in the face of oppression. A simple image in action, but monumental in social and political significance. In the 1920s, Empress Wanrong, the last Empress of China, lovingly held her dog in Tianjin after being expelled from the Forbidden City. Her gaze reveals nostalgia and loneliness, but also a small refuge of tenderness amid the tragedy of losing an empire. Even in exile, the bonds of affection offered a silent solace in the face of a world that no longer belonged to her. If you're fascinated by these stories of royalty and their secrets, subscribe to discover more incredible moments like this one. In the late 1990s, the members of Team Silent at Konami Computer Entertainment Tokyo were hard at work creating the iconic horror video game Silent Hill. Between screenshots and sketches, the team transformed nightmares into virtual reality, bringing dense and memorable atmospheres to life. Each design decision, every haunting sound, sought to immerse the player in a world where fear and uncertainty took center stage. This photo captures the concentration and passion behind one of the most influential titles in the survival horror genre. In 1942, after joining World War II, Brazil banned immigrants from speaking German, Italian, or Japanese, seeking to unify the country under Portuguese and limit foreign influences. Signs, laws, and surveillance turned words into a field of social control. For many, their mother tongue became a secret, silent memory at home. a measure that reflects how global conflicts can affect even the most mundane, speaking. In 1945, in what could be the Winter Palace or the Forbidden City in Beijing, the Japanese commander signed the surrender documents, ending years of occupation. Behind them, the costumes of the ancient palace guards seem to watch over history, while the Chinese throne silently observes. The scene blends tradition and a defining moment of modernity, the fall of an invader and the symbolic restoration of national power. Every detail of the place reminds us that history is written in ink as much as in culture. In 1941, the entrance to the Lodz Jewish ghetto was marked with a sign reading "Jews Prohibited," a brutal symbol of anti-Semitism and Nazi persecution. Behind that gate, all families were confined, isolated from the world, and deprived of their freedom and dignity. Every brick and every shadow in the photograph tells stories of suffering, resistance, and survival. An image that recalls the darkness of intolerance and the importance of not forgetting. In 1948, as Beijing prepared for the arrival of the communists, a Republican elephant and a "Good Luck Dewey" sign left the Forbidden City, capturing the political uncertainty of the time. The photograph blends humor and tension, symbols of American politics observing Chinese historical change. The city's ancient walls witnessed the end of a turbulent chapter. Every detail reflects the anxiety and anticipation of a country on the brink of transformation.
In 1924, the poet and philosopher Rabindranath Tagore visited the Forbidden City in Beijing, accompanied by the painter Nandalal Bose, the translator Lin Huyin, and the poet Xu Zhimo. Among ancient palaces and gardens, they exchanged ideas about art, literature, and culture, merging traditions from the East and West. The image captures a meeting of brilliant minds in a place steeped in history and symbolism. Every glance and gesture reflect admiration and the intellectual exchange of a cosmopolitan era. In 1936, Sada Abe was arrested by the Japanese police after committing a crime that shocked the entire country. Her story, a blend of extreme passion and violence, became a media phenomenon and an emblematic case of obsession and human tragedy. The photograph captures the moment after her arrest, freezing the tension and morbid curiosity of a society simultaneously fascinated and horrified. A reminder of how human actions can transgress extreme limits, leaving their mark on the collective memory. At the beginning of the 20th century, during the Boxer Rebellion, a prisoner captured in Beijing was punished with a kang, an instrument of humiliation that immobilized the arms and neck. The photograph reflects the rigor of the justice system at the time and the brutality with which the rebels were controlled. Every look and posture of the prisoner speaks of suffering, resistance, and the clash between tradition and foreign power. A chilling image that reminds us of the extremes of historical repression. In 1932, the United States Supreme Court was in session, captured by photographer Eric Salomon, a master of discreet photojournalism. The justices, immersed in deliberations that would define the country's course, represent the seriousness and solemnity of the judiciary. Every gesture and every look reflect the responsibility of interpreting the law in times of great economic and social uncertainty. A photograph that transports us to the heart of American justice. If you want to continue discovering historic moments that changed the world, subscribe so you don't miss the next incredible stories. In the late 1960s on Silt, the entrance to the nudist beach was marked with a serious sign that reminded people of German-style public decency. As visitors relaxed in the sun, the sign firmly imposed rules with a touch of unintentional humor. The photograph captures the contrast between personal freedom and social norms, showing how each culture regulates everyday life. A light and curious moment that reflects the discipline and peculiarity of social behavior at the time. In 1989, Hungarian border guards dismantled the border fence with Austria, paving the way for numerous East Germans to escape to freedom. Each removed post symbolized the collapse of a system that had separated families and communities for decades. The photograph captures a historic moment filled with hope, courage, and political change. A seemingly simple act that hastened the end of the Iron Curtain and transformed Europe forever. In June 1985, in a supermarket in the Netherlands, cashiers were given chairs to work in, complying with the right-to-sit laws that protected their health and well-being. The image reflects a cultural and labor shift. Employee comfort was beginning to be valued as much as efficiency. Each chair represents respect and recognition for those who sustained the daily routine of commerce. A simple but significant photograph of the evolution of labor rights in Europe. In March 1901, soldiers from the Allied forces remained in China after the Boxer Rebellion, consolidating their victory and securing control over strategic territories. The photograph shows rows of uniforms, weapons, and discipline, symbolizing foreign power in a weakened country. Each face reflects the tension and authority imposed after a bloody conflict. A moment that captures the clash between empires and local resistance, marking a painful chapter in Chinese history. In 1949, Jews were flown to Israel after being expelled from their homes in Yemen, in an operation that combined urgency, hope, and uprooting. Each passenger carried memories, belongings, and the uncertainty of a new beginning in a distant land. The photograph captures both the sadness of exile and the excitement of arriving at a promised home. A historic moment where migration became a matter of survival and cultural reconstruction.
In 1942, an exhausted and thirsty Soviet soldier quenched his need for water from the cooling tank of a damaged Maxim machine gun. The image reflects the harshness of World War II and the improvisation forced by survival on the front lines. Each gesture conveys extreme fatigue, hunger, and the constant struggle to stay alive. A photograph that shows how, even amidst conflict and destruction, soldiers found ways to endure. On October 7, 1914, brave painters stood atop the main cables of the Brooklyn Bridge, transforming an iconic symbol of New York into a clean and safe canvas. Suspended at dizzying heights, each movement required concentration and skill, recalling the audacity of workers at the time. The photograph captures the blend of risk, ingenuity, and human effort that made it possible to maintain the city's infrastructure. A moment that combines danger, art, and the determination to build and preserve. In the late 1950s, Afghan women browsed a record store, exploring the music and culture that was arriving in the country during a period of relative openness. Their gestures and smiles reflect curiosity, independence, and a connection to modern trends that contrasted with more rigid traditions. The photograph captures an everyday moment, yet one steeped in social history and cultural change. A moment that reminds us that even in difficult times, life and joy found their place. In 1953, a mother and her son watched nuclear tests in Nevada, a terrifying and fascinating spectacle of technological might. Distance could not hide the enormity of the flash or the impact of the explosion on the imaginations of those who witnessed it. Their faces reflect a mixture of curiosity, amazement, and an innocent incomprehension of the real danger. A photograph that captures the tension of the Cold War and the human fascination with the unimaginable. In March 1955, men were preparing to leave for work while women and children waved goodbye from the window, waving with smiles and raised hands. Bob Lerner's photograph captures an everyday moment that reflects family routine and the importance of bonds in daily life. Every gesture, every glance conveys affection and silent support behind the apparent normality. A simple moment, yet one filled with humanity and family tradition in the middle of the 1950s. In 1938, Benito Mussolini climbed onto a wheat threshing machine in Aprilia, Italy, to symbolically inaugurate the harvest. The image reflects the fascist propaganda that sought to link the dictator with progress, productivity, and the nation's agricultural rebirth. Each calculated gesture displayed power, control, and the narrative of a leader omnipresent in every aspect of Italian life. A photograph that combines politics, symbolism, and nationalist ambition in a single instant. In 1979, communist leader Deng Xiaoping donned a cowboy hat during his visit to the United States, a symbol of China's opening to the world. The image combines humor and diplomacy, showing a country beginning to look outward after decades of isolation. Each gesture reflects curiosity and political pragmatism, a moment that marked a historic shift in international relations. In 1991, a man stood on an overpass watching the tanks of the Yugoslav People's Army retreat from the border between Slovenia and Croatia. The scene captured the end of a brief but intense conflict after Slovenia's declaration of independence. Each vehicle that retreated symbolized the collapse of central authority and the beginning of a new chapter for the region. A photograph that reflects tension, political change, and the hope for autonomy. In 1861, Bror August Ritterhirte, harbor master in the Swedish colony of St. Bartholomew in the Caribbean, posed for this photograph. Her gaze and posture reflect the power she wielded over slaves and the daily life of the colony. Behind her uniform lie stories of exploitation and control in a society marked by slavery. An image that reminds us of the power structures and injustice of a colonial past that must not be forgotten. In 1985, a group of Puritans protested on a Florida beach against swimsuits they considered too revealing, carrying signs that warned, "You will follow to hell." The photograph captures the tension between conservative morality and individual freedom in the 1980s. Every gesture and sign reflect the obsession with social control and the imposition of rules on daily life. A moment that blends humor, rigor, and the peculiar culture of the American era.
In 1989, exactly 25 years ago, the latest fall of a communist regime occurred in a Warsaw Pact country, Bucharest, Romania. The streets and squares were filled with protesters demanding freedom and political change after decades of repression. This photograph captures the tension, hope, and determination of a people determined to reclaim their destiny. A historic moment that marked the end of an era and the beginning of transformation in Eastern Europe. In June 1925, an Indian telephone operator worked at the Helen of Many Glacier Hotel, connecting calls and serving as the vital link between guests and service. Her concentration and professionalism reflect the importance of this role in daily life at the time. The photograph captures both the emerging technological modernity and the presence of women in key positions, a moment that combines history, labor, and the social transformation of the 1920s. In 1911, 34 members of the Neapolitan Camorra were locked in cages inside the courtroom in Viterbo, Italy, during their trial. On the right, a smaller cage protected a witness, demonstrating the seriousness of organized crime and the need for extraordinary measures. The photograph captures the tension, judicial order, and public spectacle of a trial that sought to confront the mafia. A historic moment where law and fear came face to face. On January 8, 1959, Fidel Castro entered Havana, marking the beginning of his control over Cuba and the end of the Batista regime. The photograph captures the euphoria of the crowds and the tension of a country on the verge of radical change.
Each face reflects hope, fear, and the anticipation of a historic transformation. A moment that symbolizes the arrival of new leadership and the beginning of a revolution that would mark the world. In 1906, in Mukden, a Chinese prisoner was punished by kneeling in chains, his arms resting on his small fingers, an extreme form of humiliation and physical pain. The photograph reveals the harshness of the judicial system of the time and the severe methods of control and punishment. Every detail reflects suffering, discipline, and the harshness of the law in ancient times. A moment that shows the limits of authority and human resistance to oppression. In the late 1930s and early 1940s, Mao Zedong posed with an American journalist during the Second Sino-Japanese War, presenting his image as a revolutionary leader to the outside world. The photograph reflects the international interest in the conflict and Mao's strategy for projecting his political and military influence. Every gesture and expression communicate authority, prudence, and diplomacy in wartime. A moment that captures the intersection of communication, propaganda, and China's history in conflict. Between 1962 and 1965, the Fathers of the Second Vatican Council left St. Peter's Basilica, accompanied by their secretaries, after deliberating on reforms that would transform the Catholic Church. The photograph reflects solemnity, tradition, and the historical weight of decisions that would impact millions of faithful around the world. Every gesture conveys concentration and responsibility in a moment of ecclesiastical renewal and openness. A moment that captures the combination of ritual, authority, and change within the heart of the Vatican. In 1955, Princess Yvonne Wittgenstein drank directly from a bottle while Prince Alexander rested with a half-smoked cigarette aboard Bartholomew March's yacht off Majorca. The photograph captures a moment of luxury, carefree attitude, and aristocratic rebellion. Every gesture reflects leisure, intimacy, and the casual elegance of the era's high society. A moment that combines style, fun, and a privileged life on the Mediterranean Sea. In 1936, during the launching of the Horst Wessel ship in Nazi Germany, one man stood his ground, refusing to make the Sieg Heil salute. The photograph captures an act of courage and silent resistance in the face of oppression and totalitarian propaganda. Every posture and expression reflect personal conviction and moral courage in an environment of widespread fear. A historic moment that symbolizes the strength of the individual in the face of authoritarianism.